Hey there, hunters. I wanted to do some commentary over some boss fights I've been doing here in Elden Ring, just to discuss the bow build, how it's going, and kind of what I'm doing with it. If you don't want to listen to me rambling, then by all means just mute the video and you can watch the bow-only boss fights. But anyway, let me just get into this. So the first thing I want to address which is the age-old question of, is bow a viable build? And the short answer is yes, it is. But it's definitely not without flaws and issues, especially comparing it to any other build out there. So I kind of want to talk about the hurdles of bow builds in Elden Ring really quick. First is obviously the ammunition. Arrows are really expensive in this game, and you really can't seem to ever have enough. Like, you can only carry 700. Most of my runes end up going to buying and making arrows, and while I'm over level 100 now, I also have like 100 hours into the game because I've spent so much time just grinding runes for arrows. So that's going to be a constant issue with the build. You're effectively firing runes. Bosses, especially, because if you don't kill them on your first try, you're going to be going through arrows constantly without gaining any runes. So you're just depleting more and more for nothing. Then you have to wonder, is it worth spending all that time and money just so you have the novelty of using a bow when you have so many other options with, amazing melee builds and caster builds? I mean, not really in my eye, but here I am still playing them because I'm stubborn. So yes, you can craft arrows, and most of them at that, but even so, it's just faster to farm runes and buy them, especially when you get the ball bearings to buy all the materials for the bows anyways. Now, going through zones with bows is fine, as most of the lesser enemies can be killed in like 2 headshots, but in the later zones, standard enemies have like 5 to 8,000 life, and arrows still plink away for about 300 damage per shot, and it's just not really feasible to throw like 15 arrows at one enemy. So I mean, yeah, it works, but I wouldn't really recommend using bows as a primary source of damage, especially for clearing zones. Great bows and Ballista work much better, as they can usually 1 or 2 tap most enemies, but always have a melee weapon as backup. I was sticking with daggers for most of the game, but recently I swapped over to curved swords. You just need something to get rid of like those enemies that have 300 life. So next I want to discuss the actual weapons. So bows do come in 3 types, short bow, long bow, and great bows. But honestly, all bows feel pretty much exactly the same, within their respective class. You can't augment different affinities for scaling on any bow, they're always just standard, and the bow ashes of war are pretty bad, to be honest. So there's not much variety to the bows. On top of all the bows having the exact same scalings, like it's always D in strength and dex, and maybe D in faith, or a serpent's bow is like D in arcane. Even at like somber +9 or normal +24s, all the bows have D scaling in pretty much everything, except the golem great bow, which has C scaling and strength. So yeah, scaling and stats are kind of rough for bows, because you're not really getting much damage from scaling, and they naturally have low damage anyways, so they don't scale very well until the late game. It's really annoying that the black bow has the D scaling in dex, by the way, even at +9, whereas other Souls games, like the black bow has been the A and S scaling dex bow. I'm not sure why it's different here, but anyway, all the bows just kind of feel boring and bad because they all look and do the exact same things pretty much. Now for crossbows, they have standard and the hand ballistas. They also have no scaling at all, which is normal, and honestly, I think I use crossbows more than bows at this point. It's nice to have the pulley crossbow for status, and the jar cannon for taking out enemies without having to engage them. I feel like crossbows serve a better purpose as a ranged option compared to bows, since you just one-hand them and keep a weapon free, and then use the crossbow to pull and finish off enemies safely. Bows requiring 2 hands kinda means it's gonna be like your primary weapon. Okay, so enough with the complaining rant. I'm still here playing bow builds, and I still want to share some highlights and some things I've learned about them that may help out other gunners out there. So first is that I did spec out of Arcane. My original plan was to go Arcane Poison and Bleed, but after doing a lot of testing, I found out how pointless that was, so I went for a more quality build with Strength, Dex, and Vitality as my focus, which is cool because that works as a baseline for basically every and any other build out there. So starting from there, definitely carry more than one type of ranged weapon. I carry a bow, a great bow, and a ballista with me at all times, since I can effectively carry more ammo as I can swap out of them when they're depleted, and great bows act pretty much identical to ballistas anyways, and they're just really good at clearing trash in zones. For bows, I originally used the serpent's bow since I was going that whole poison route and it got scaling with arcane, but I swapped out of that and into the black bow when I found it here in Lindell. Now why? Because the black bow is interesting. It shoots like a short bow, and by that I mean it can jump shoot and then follow up the jump shot with another shot on the ground really fast, and it can shoot out of rolls, and it just draws faster. It's kind of like the composite bow, it's that whole same moveset, which I know sounds weird for a bow, but yeah. Now longbows can't normally do that, and they're usually pretty slow to draw. The black bow sadly can't change its weapon skill and it's stuck with barrage, but it turns out barrage is the best bow skill anyways. So it lets you just bombard enemies with arrows for 2 focus points each, which is really nice for bleed and frostbite. But it's also really good since it's already a longbow and does longbow damage. That being said, it's not really any stronger than any other bow out there since they all have terrible scaling. I'm just using it because of the extra mobility it provides. For the great bow, I use the Golem's great bow since it's the only bow to have a C tier in scaling, which is in strength, which is sad, but there's no C scaling dex bow. It weighs a lot, but it's got the best damage out of all the great bows, and the rain of arrows skill is better with this than using Radahn's bow, since Radahn's costs 32 focus instead of the actual Ashes of War costing 20, and it's literally the same skill. Now, for the Ballista, obviously the jar cannon is stronger, but since I don't have the extra weight to spare thanks to the Golem bow, I'm using the hand Ballista. It's close enough in damage anyways, and in case you were wondering, yes, they have the exact same recovery time despite the animations being slightly different. Jar cannon is just more damage for more weight. Then for the crossbow, obviously I use the pulley crossbow. Now this thing has terrible damage. If you want a good damaging crossbow, the black sniper crossbow from inside the round table hold is your best bet, because the pulley crossbow has low attack and the 3 volley burst of bolts is not 100% damage per bolt. It's like rapid fire Monster Hunter. There's a damage penalty here, so you're effectively only getting like 2 times damage or a little bit more than 2 times instead of full 3 times damage, but at the cost of 3 bolts anyways. It's not really bolt efficient. What it does provide though is a quick way to apply statuses such as Scarlet Rot and Poison while still having the ability to keep your arrows for your bow stocked up with more damaging arrows such as Bleed and Frostbite. There are a few tricks you can utilize to help with your bow builds too. First is the Physic Flask to give you infinite FP for 10 seconds. This is a great way to start a fight. You could just use Barrage and pelt the boss with frost arrows to apply Frostbite really quick. And if you don't know, Frostbite gives armor penalty to them so you can actually deal more damage while they're frostbitten. Next is the Perfume Bottles for the Blood Boil serum thing. This gives you a flat boost of damage like 15 or 20% for a minute, but it does make you take more damage. It's really nice to go with that initial volley of arrows at the start of a fight with the flask. These are kind of expensive to make, but you can also use Exalted Flesh, which offers slightly less bonus damage, but you also don't take any more damage, and they're easier to craft. They don't stack in case you're wondering, you can only have one of those on. You can also use the Lance Talisman, which increases counterattack damage with thrusting weapons, and bows do count as thrusting. So if you shoot an enemy who's attacking, you do get the bonus damage, which is like 15% or something. And honestly, you're going to be doing that a lot anyway. The other talismans I use for range are obviously the 10% damage buff from the Bow Sting Talisman. And then for clearing, I use the Red Sword Talisman for 10% more damage on full HP. And then the increased range for Bow's Talisman. For bosses, I typically swap out of the full HP Talisman because usually something tags me. And I go for the increased stamina regen instead, which is really nice. And then pro tips about summons. Mimic is trash for range builds. Yes, everyone loves Mimic. Don't use it if you're a ranged player. The Mimic runs around and does fisticuffs most of the time, or fires arrows super slow. He just runs around and he wastes a lot of time. He's really bad with the bow. If you want a good summon, use the Radahn soldiers, which cost 71 focus. That was my base focus, so it's like, all my focus without any investment. I feel like most other people should be able to use them. They're really tanky and really strong. Or you can use the Marionette Archers, which are seriously good for harassing bosses. They force their attention all the time because they just don't let up on their arrows. They are a little frail in the late game, but they're just the best things for distractions that I've ever seen. But yeah, that's essentially all for me. I just wanted to show you my bow build and kind of what I've been doing with it. I've been having a lot of fun with bosses. But yeah, thank you all for watching, and good luck out there, hunters.